make everybody participate here and ask the questions to the people. And if you people know, then you can tell me, then I don't have to explain it. It's a lot easier for me. But what I did was I bought 8 horns from 8 different periods. And I'm going to describe them, let you know what a horn is, how they're used in radio, how they're used in record player. Basically, a horn is nothing but a megaphone. If anybody's ever seen a high school football game, you see the cheerleaders. They're yelling into something that looks sort of like a megaphone. They shish boom ba and rah rah. What they did was they tied nothing but an earphone driver to it, and it produced sound. Very directional. And what they did was they took DC current, put it between 2 magnets, pulsating current, to produce a noise that you would understand. And that's basically what an earphone is. But the earphone was only good for really one person. And if you wanted to listen to a radio with a group of people in the room, what they did was they took the earphone and they put it under a funnel. Where it was originated, I don't know, but I've seen earphones and horns back as far as 1600s. They didn't have the earphones, but they had the horns. If you ever seen the old people that hold the horn on the end of the ears because they couldn't hear, it actually amplified the noise that was coming into the horn. So what I did was I took a couple horns up here just to show the different styles of horns, different techniques of horns, and the early to late, right up to the paper horn. The first horn I have here, which is an unusual horn, and it's a homemade horn. And does anybody know what type of horn this is? It was used in the 1800s, believe it or not. There wasn't a driver on the end, but they still used it. I have 2 articles at home from 1865 that tell how to build this horn. Does anybody know what this is?
Parabolic.
It's a what?
Telephone.
No. This is what they call the parabolic horn. All right? It's a directional horn. They used it as a receiver, not as a transmitter. What they did was when the doctors invented the stethoscope, all right, what they did was they put the end of the stethoscope in the cone, all right? The cone was about 4 feet in diameter, and they can hear all the way across the field, all right? So it was actually a receiver horn. And what the guy did with this horn was he actually made a parabolic horn, a directional horn, and all he did was put an earphone in the front of it. Very directional, and it's a very good playing horn. The horn cost about 6 cents in 1925 to make, because everything was used at the house. So it's kind of a unique horn. Guy put a lot of work into this one. The horns, before they had drivers, had little openings on the bottom of the horns. Either you could put an earphone at the bottom of the horn, or you could do what this guy did. He made his own horn base, and what he did was he drilled a hole straight down, drilled 2 holes across, put a set of earphones on the side, and he actually got stereo headphones coming out through the top of the horn. So this is actually a homemade horn. It's unique. And they were craftsmen back in those times, so they really built these horns pretty good.
What was the horn? How did you make the horn?
The horn was actually store-bought. The horn was only about $8 the top half, because all it was pressed paper. All right. You'll see a lot of ads where the tone quality and wooden horns, they have better tone quality. Some people say the stamped horn is better quality. They're all the same. It was just really a technique. I don't know how many of you read in the ARC about the grid leak catch pan, all right, which was some story that they made. It actually had a grid leak in the circuit, and they said it leaked fluid. And somebody just went out and made a drip pan, and they were selling the drip pans in the early 20s. They never leaked. Just a come-on gimmick. As the horn started progressing, the actual horn, the early horns were actually straight neck horns. So if you're looking for an early horn, look for the ones with the straight necks, because the straight necks were thought to be the best going horns at the time, and that was in the early years. They made them big, they made them small.
What time period are you talking about, Mark?
We're talking 1920 to 1923, even before that.
That was it.
That was it. And they made the horns all the way up to 26. They still had horns.
And how much would one cost? Like,
It all depended on what you wanted to pay for the horn. We know that Magnavox was the leader in horns. And Magnavox horns were very expensive, but they did have a lot of quality and craftsmanship in their horns. They were the first ones to come through with the dynamic horn, which ran a 6-volt battery on the car, off a battery for the main coils, for the center coil, and then a regular set to give you more bassiness through the horn. They were leaders. That's all they did, and they even set the record for building the biggest horn in the world, which was something like 23 feet in diameter. If you didn't have a horn at the time and you just wanted to use, say, a record player horn, they also made tools to modify it where you can stick it on, take a set of earphones, put them on the ends of this little piece here, and then you stuck this right in the phonograph. All right, and it played right through a phonograph horn. They made all kinds of odds and ends. They made a regular headset, which this is nothing but an earphone. They made a clip that went on top of it like that, so you can stick it up underneath the horn. So they were really unique. They really made a lot of stuff. Like I said, the earlier horns, most of them had straight necks and they had earphone drivers. But then they started getting late with this, and the technology started to expand a little bit. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to show you this one. This is unrestored, but this is one of those earphone driver horns. And what you did, you stuck the earphone in here, pushed it up, and that's what you got, was a little funnel of music coming through there.
This was cardboard?
This is cardboard, little oak tag. But this has been sitting in a closet.
How old was that one?
Excuse me?
How old was that one?
How old is that one? I would put it around 1922, 23. All right, this was made by a manufacturer. In fact, it was the same manufacturer that made this little horn here, Qualiton. All right. A lot of the radio companies made the horns directly for the radio, saying that when you put the horn with the radio that they manufactured, you got the best volume control, the best clarity coming out of the radio. That was not true. When you bought a radio, you didn't get the horn with it. You had to buy the horn separately. And on some horns, you had to buy the drivers for the horns. They sold the horn bottoms, they sold the horn tops. What you had to do is, depending on how much money you had at the time, was go out and buy the parts you needed to actually build a horn. This is one of the fancy companies that put out a horn. This is around 1925. They started getting fancy with these horns because they wanted them to fit in the home and look like part of the furniture in the home. The bell is actually made out of celluloid, all right? Very flammable. If you put a cigarette or a match near this, it'll go right up on fire. It's way over on the other side of my room. Plus, it's very light plastic in the top. And they put it one step further. They made it so you can swivel the horn anywhere you wanted to go with the music. Very good horn. I played this horn, and it's a very loud horn too. They also came out with in later times adjustable drivers for the horns, which is really nice. The RCA, in my opinion, was one of the best horns they ever made. The RCA I use with my collection pieces when I go to play the radios after restorations. The beauty of the RCA horn is it has a fine thread in the horn to turn the volume either completely up or turn the volume, pull the disc away from the magnets and turn the volume down. So you could run it with a set that didn't have the cutout stages for the second stage audio. So if you got a real close station and it was driving the horn speaker over, over driving the speaker, you can actually cut it down by the adjustment underneath. Another early horn is the Western Electric horn, which is this one here. They made two horns almost identically the same, except one had an extra transformer in it for a Western Electric loudspeaking outfit, so you can actually amplify your voice, just like what they used up here before. And as you can see, they believed that the bigger the horn, the more music you got out of the horn. So they made them extra big. It's one of the truly big horns. And as I said, as they progressed in the horns, and they started making the drivers with adjustments in it where you can use them with the radio. So if your radio is a little bit off frequency, or if let's say the tube was a little bit weak, you can actually adjust the horns. After they've gone all through that, they started with the paper horns, which actually fit in the house, which was more of a design, which was this right here. And what they did was they turned around, they lined the horn with paper, and instead of using a metal disc with paper, they actually put the magnets on the inside and put a pin through the paper. So they actually made the pin vibrate the paper, which would vibrate the whole front of the horn. And that actually gave you very good results with reproduction of music or whatever you wanted. They then finally turned it around and put it to the back. They made designs in the front. And after that, they started coming out with the actual PM speaker. And that's basically it.
What was the year of the cone?
The Western Electric cone, I think it's 1924 or 25, around that area. All right? They'll even go up to 1927, and I picked up paper cones as far as 1929.
How early did this go?
The paper cones, around 25 they started.
Mark, the celluloid figure, where did you find that and what's the value of it?
Okay, I found the celluloid speaker in Neptune. I had gotten a tip from a vendor over at the Red Bank Gallery. He had told me that the guy had a speaker that had flower petals on it. I thought it was an Ampion, which I have 3 of those. I have 161 horns, and they kind of take over my place. They're so dainty. The thing is you don't see them around enough. You always see the radio, but you never find the horn for the radio. So I like to keep the horns with the radios. So if I have 161 radios, I know I got the horn for each radio. But anyway, I had found this horn in Neptune, which I got a tip on. The guy had a Federal 102 portable at the same time. He had them both sitting on the shelf. This particular horn was white when I got it. I paid $200 for the Federal portable and the horn. The horn, I didn't even know it was a celluloid horn. I thought it was black because it was so covered up with paint. What happened was paint fell off the shelf onto the horn itself. And when I started restoring the horn, I started seeing red. I thought it was primer coming off the front of the bell. I didn't know what it was. I knew it was celluloid, but I didn't know that it was a red celluloid horn.
How did you get the paint off?
There's this stuff that's called Goof Off. It comes in a little can about this big. You can buy it at Rickles, at mostly paint stores. And what happens if you drop latex paint on a carpet or on a door, you put this stuff on there. It's a mixture of lighter fluid and acetone. And I put it on there, started taking the paint off, and it started getting redder and redder. By the time I did the first rib, I said, boy, this is a nice red horn. And I did the whole horn, and it just took everything completely off.
But it didn't hurt the horn.
It didn't hurt the celluloid at all. I thought it would eat right into it, but it didn't. And then the base was the same thing. It was just all over the place. The neck I had to repaint. The
How
neck,
did you make it so shiny?
that's nothing but car wax. That's basically, most of the horns in restorations, I use either a shoe polish, a black car polish like Colorback or Color Gun they have on TV, regular wax, a nice soft paste wax, and sometimes I'll use polish if I really want it shiny.
Mark, what's the material of the black horns?
On the black horns, it's composite, pressed cardboard. They made them out of wood. They made them out of celluloid. They made them out of plastic.
The RCA
Bakelite.
is
That's rubber. Pressed rubber. In fact, on the side of the RCA horns, you'll find Miller Rubber Company on the side of it, and that's where it came from. They also made it for brandies, too. The same RCA horn is the same as the brandies one.
The Western Electric, it's got a large base on it. What's really in it?
Well, the base on it was so that it weighted it down so you didn't knock it over.
Good point.
All right, that's basically what it was. In fact, I have 7 or 8 of these horns, and the bases are very heavy. And the uniqueness is if you knock it over, the horn is gone. You're not gonna, I lost 2 horns too.
How do you transport them without breaking?
Well, I live across town, so it was easy for me. I just set them on top of a blanket. But I did lose a couple in transport. Yeah, well, and I was sick. I lost a horn that was 2 foot in length that was paper in transport. So it's you got to really pack them. I know originally they came packed in wood, wooden crates, and they were suspended. Some of them were suspended. They're very tough to ship.
What was the selling price on some of those horns? Years ago.
I think the Burns horn was something like $29. That was an expensive horn, all right, because of the coloration of the horn, how it fit in the house. Then they range from $15 to $25. I think the most expensive horn I've seen was $89, and that's not on the horn that I have here, all right? Really not that high, but you have to realize back then, nothing was high. And not too many people had factory horns either, especially in the beginning. They couldn't afford it. They couldn't even afford radios. That's why you came into radios such as the one that you have there. They just could afford the 1-2 radios.
I think it's fair to mention that although they don't appear to be expensive by today's standards, you work for $1 a day also.
That's right. Absolutely.
Don't forget that this is high tech.
That's right. That's what it was. It was high tech.
Mark, do you know where the Western one is manufactured?
The Western Electric?
Yeah, where it's manufactured?
That I couldn't tell you. I know that there was a couple spots in New Jersey. I know that I have a couple articles on how they made the paper. And I don't know exactly where the Western Electric horns were made or the paper horns. But I know they were made in 2 different locations. The papers were made different than the horns in the middle location.
What was the vintage of the horn for West Electric?
Which one? This one
Was
here?
it in the 20s?
In the
Either
20s.
made in Kearney, New Jersey, or out in Chicago at Hawthorne.
That's what I said, that because they had 2 factories, I know that
Two factories
produced
they had at the
horns.
time.
In fact, I know one factory produced a horn exactly like that, which was the 10D instead of the 518W. Any other questions? Nothing on restoration or anything?
Yeah, well, Western Electric horn, it's like a pressed cardboard stuff, right?
Yes, it is. It's a pressed cardboard.
Yeah, I have one where the edge is a little raggedy. How would you,
I've come into that a lot. And what I've done is if I get a horn that's sort of like fell over, you find a cardboard that's crunched up on the end, I straighten it out the best way I can. I add a little bit of fiberglass to it, stiffen it up. All right? I put it to the outside, not to the inside, because when you first look at the horn, you look at the inside of the horn. I keep that as straight as possible. Put it to the outside, then I just sand it down. All right?
is that right?
It's sort of like a fill. It's almost like a liquid that you put on fiberglass. You actually don't use the fiberglass. Understand? It's the liquid epoxy that you use with it. It's like a hardener. All right? It actually hardens it back to shape. And then I sand that down. And what I wind up doing, any kind of wrinkle or anything like that, I usually wind up painting the horn. And don't paint it with a glossy color. They were not glossy back then. Paint it with a satin finish.
Another filler you can use, which everybody has around the house. Elmer's carbon's glue.
Yes.
Talcum
I've done that to glue the horns
powder.
back
Easy to
together.
sand and epoxy.
That's right.
Talcum powder. Talcum powder. That's
How you put your
Right.
Who makes the reproduction for the Western Electric?
There is a guy, I have his card at the house, he does beautiful work. I bought a 2-foot, I have a 2-foot paper horn at the house, and I bought the 2-foot reproducer that he had, and it was excellent, excellent copy.
Because I have Western Electric, and I'm just missing the paper phone.
Right,
And I
and,
ran into somebody that lost his card. I've seen one of the reproductions.
yeah, I ran into that person, not this year, but last year up at Rochester. He had 3 horns on the table.
He was
And they-
at Rochester this year.
Yeah, I saw
And
him.
he was at Mark's swap also.
Right.
Are you talking about the horn or the paper?
No, the fellow that makes the paper.
Fellow that makes the
Yeah,
copy of the
tall
papers.
fellow with the mustache.
He's got a
Yeah,
Pathfinder.
He did mine at Buford Chichester.
That's right, Buford.
Right.
I got his name and address.
I ran into him about a
He's
year
super
ago.
guy.
Up at Rochester, and he had 3 of my horns, my old horns that I sold in the auction on the table there. There was an Amarola, there was a 3 paper horns, and little did he know that I put the paper in all 3 horns. One was like a rolled paper towel horn. I forgot the name of it, but he says, no, this is factory, and I says, no, this is me. And he says, well, how can you prove it? We turned the horn upside down, my name was in the bottom of it. I did it in 1974. I paid someone $10 to put the design on for me. A dictograph, that's what it was, a dictograph rolled paper horn. But we were laughing over that. And then 2 weeks later, when we went to the Mark meet, I bought the big cone off him because he did such quality work, that guy.
as far as the physics of the size of the horn are concerned, if you have a certain amount of sound and you narrow down the area you're directing it to by using a horn, yes, you get not an increase in loudness, but you get it all going one direction so it's not dissipated into the air.
Right.
Okay, basic physics. From there, why would they make horns so big? Because a horn being big, you're still going to project it to the same angle. Unless we're talking about the horn itself resonating, and in resonating, you're giving yourself an increase in the sound output at certain frequencies that are intelligible.
All right, well, I knew you were going to ask that question, and that's why I brought in this other horn, this early horn. As you can see, their theory back then was the bigger the funnel, the bigger the horn, the more voice you got. But what they did as they started growing and orchestrating, the orchestral horn was noted variety. They started making a chambered horn. They started putting cardboard in the horn because the actual horns and the drivers were going so loud they started to vibrate. And the people didn't like that. They wanted a clear voice coming out. So what they did was the same thing they did here. If you can look inside the horn, you're going to see a chamber on the inside of the horn. And that's exactly what they did. And they started doing the same thing. Then they turned around and said, well, hey, we can get away without putting the chambers inside the horn. Let's make the horn gooseneck, all right, and go up as a gooseneck. All right, that's why the horn started getting shorter, fatter, and they started to swoop around. That was a good question.
Mark, you're actually getting amplification.
You were still getting the amplification, but you were getting a deeper tone coming out of it too. That's what the people wanted. You got the deeper tone, you got the loudest. It's still only going to be in one direction. It all depended on how powerful the driver actually was driven.
Yeah,
and
a
with
deeper
what too.
tone would be a larger horn would resonate at a lower frequency.
Right.
A smaller horn would resonate at a higher frequency. So in dropping the tone, I guess the horn itself resonating is going to add to the volume level by decreasing maybe some of the higher frequencies and putting them in a lower frequency category and adding or summing.
Hold a second, I got to check my Saturn. You talked right over my head. I'm not that as far as that.
I'm just looking at
I'm not that
it as
smart.
far as acoustics.
Oh, see, I'm not really
acoustics
into
are
the acoustic. All I know is what they did, point 1, point 2, point 3, and why they did that. Huh?
You want me to talk about the physics a little bit?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Take the floor.
A horn is an impedance matching device. The earphone driver can provide fairly high pressure, but it's only at a very small area, so it does not couple effectively to the air.
Okay.
So you use a horn to spread that high pressure in a small area out to a low pressure over a large area. To have good frequency response, the horn expands exponentially. That is, when you double the distance out the horn, its area gets 4 times as large.
Sure.
It's called an exponential horn, and you'll notice a lot of these horns are straight, but the more sophisticated ones are exponential. They flare. The distance over which the area doubles establishes what's called the flare rate of the horn. If it's a longer distance, a longer flare rate, the low cutoff frequency is then lower. Horns cut off very sharply below their cutoff frequency, which is a physical thing determined by the flare rate. And then the loudness then for any particular flare rate depends how long you carry the horn out, how big you make the mouth, which of course will get crazy
And
pretty
then the
quick.
bell at the end can effectively control dispersion after you get done with those.
Yeah, well, it's going to be, it doesn't point it so much. The end of the horn is almost like a big speaker.
Thank you.
And the other thing is the horns are exceedingly efficient. And you had radios where you only had a couple of milliwatts output power. So you needed to use a very efficient speaker mechanism. Later on, when you had power to burn, then you could go to paper cone speakers and get away with it. That's why PA speakers are still horns. So you get the maximum amount of sound out of it.
Yeah, so basically there was a whole lot of improvement to be done over just putting a headphone at the bottom of a horn.
Well, the horn
To make it coupled to the horn properly.
Yeah, but the horns were already understood by the acoustic phonograph guys, because the problem was the same. So the science of it was already pretty well worked out.
Yes.
My dad was a young man in the early 1920s, and he told me that he used to do travel before he went to high school. He told me that he had to travel for 2 or 3 weeks to get enough money to buy a single tube for his first 1-tube radio. He hooked it up wrong, burned it out, so it was another 3 weeks before he got another tube. But once he got it working, he found that by taking one of his mother's bowls and putting it in the center of the table, placing the earphones in the bowl, then the family could enjoy the radio together.
Well, that's exactly what that horn is made out of. It's a salad bowl.
In his case, they laid it in.
Laid it right inside. See, this is standing upright like a parabolic speaker. It just goes straight to you.
He experimented with a number of bowls until he got one that was louder than the rest.
You know, that's not the first time I've heard that story. I've heard that story before where they placed it in a bowl or a can. All right, and it sounds a lot tinnier in a can, but the bowl theory, I believe that because the way that this one played, it played pretty good. Is that it? Everything else? Any